Trump's back in the White House. Republicans control both the House and the Senate. So Democrats aren't just unhappy about this, they're turning on each other. That's right. The Hill reports that Jill Biden is mad at Nancy Pelosi after she called for her husband, Joe, to step down. You remember that? And that Kamala Harris feels dissed by Joe Biden for saying that if he had stayed in, he would have won the presidency. Congress is also butting heads about the best path forward. So how long can they afford to hold a grudge with each other before working on a plan to get power back? I ask you.
I was going to defer to the Democrats, but I'll go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that they need to stop fighting with each other and actually go back to their districts and their states and check in with the people that put them in office. Because the infighting, they all get... I really despise Congress and their lack of ability to do anything, not to mention the dirty money that circulates there. But they get so obsessed with each other, not just Democrats. Republicans do the same thing. They all play power games, partisan jerseys are put on. They need to go home. They need to go home and check back in and get a reality check of the people they represented and come back with a mission statement that reflects those wants. And then they can be done fighting.
Okay. I mean, the reality of this moment is kind of incredible. Donald Trump is in power. Republicans control the House and the Senate. And just yesterday, Donald Trump was speaking to leaders at Davos and the World Economic Forum. And world leaders are lining up to meet with him. It's a very different moment in Washington. And I've been struck by how Democrats haven't seemed to get their footing on. They don't have a leader right now. There is not a clear leader.
Well, give them a minute.
I mean, I don't know how much time they're going to have. And then on top of that, there's not a clear plan, strategy, and message. And I think the closest thing to a message of kind of who they're going to go after, other than just Trump is bad, was in Joe Biden's farewell address when he talked about these corporate oligarchs and the tech industrial complex. Smart, thing to identify as the enemy. But oh my goodness, that's why Democrats lost. No one talks like that. No one in the Union Hall talks about the corporate oligarchs and the tech industrial complex. You need to talk like a real human being. And for all the criticisms...
Who do you think is that person? Who do you... give me an idea.
Real quick, for all the criticisms I have of Donald Trump, he speaks like real people speak. They're taking advantage of you. They're ripping you off.
Yeah,
they're not using that kind of language.
He speaks like an annoying person.
I think we do have a leader. I think that leader is Minority Leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries. So there is no question that there is a leader. He's from Brooklyn. He speaks with his New York Brooklyn accent. I went to college with him. I know him extremely well. And he talks real talk. And I have a completely different take on this. I think the Democrats are actually falling in line as opposed to fighting with each other. We just saw the Democrats, many Democrats, cross the aisle and work with Republicans on the Lake and Riley Act. And that act is basically going to allow undocumented immigrants, to be deported even if they are accused of a crime.
Even if just accused.
Just accused of a crime.
Legal immigrants?
No,
undocumented. And I have to say, that's something that most Democrats don't agree with. But they got in line because they know that they need to listen to the American people. They need to pass something that they may not want to pass. And they know that in 18 months, they will take control of the House, and it won't be Minority Speaker Jeffries, it will be Majority Speaker Jeffries.
Let me weigh in on this. So I don't know how much of this infighting doesn't get exaggerated by the media. Like the Jill Biden, Nancy Pelosi thing, that's real. We saw Jill actually be quoted and interviewed. We've heard from Nancy Pelosi. We've heard from her daughter. That's real. Who cares? Joe Biden's not running again. Joe Biden's, in Delaware. They're not going to be an influence in this. The Kamala Harris versus Joe Biden thing, I have to tell you, I know Kamala Harris very well and her people very well. I haven't heard this bitching and moaning that keeps getting reported. So I don't know what low-level staffer is getting interviewed. That all being said, I would say to Democrats, like whenever I hear of this or read of this, I feel like I want to channel Cher and Moonstruck and just slap them over the face and say, get over it. Because, as I have said ad nauseum, right now, Donald Trump has no guardrails. He's got the Congress, both houses. He's got the White House. He has got a lot of Democrats falling in line, and he's got the Supreme Court in his pocket. The only way there will be guardrails is if Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker of the House in 2 years because they win back the House or they win back
But how
the
much
Senate.
damage is this guy going to do in 2 years?
I don't
He's
think he
already
can do
started.
that much, and let me tell you why. There is such a super slim majority in Congress, and I don't think people talk about that enough.
the closest
if you
in
think
history,
about
I
it, it's the
think.
closest. Thank you, Sarah. It's the closest in history. Right now, if Elise Stefanik is confirmed, as it is expected, Republicans' House majority would drop down to 217 to 215. That means at that point they can't pass afford a single defection to pass legislation along
Can't
party
afford a
lines
single.
until the vacancies are filled. So there is a guardrail there, and that's the Democratic Party, which, by the way, again, has fallen in line. They are
Okay.
strong.
Well,
they
I would,
are
only but I would disagree on this. So it takes 218 to pass something in the House, and what Donald Trump and Republicans have proposed is doing a giant package that will address energy infrastructure in the country, his tax cuts that he wants to reauthorize. Those are going to pass the Republican House, and then they're going to go as part of what's called reconciliation to the Senate, and they'll only need a simple majority to pass in the Senate. So those things, some of which I think is good policy, is going to pass this Congress. But the thing that
For 18 months.
that Democrats don't seem to be aware of is their likelihood of winning back anything in the Senate is very low because they lost Tester in Montana. Montana is not in play anymore for Democrats, and West Virginia is not.
I always
Their
liked
map
him,
is
too.
shrinking.
They need to talk to Gallego and Slotkin,
Yeah,
who,
that's what
out
they
of
need to do.
Arizona and Michigan, because those were two Democrats that won in states that Trump took. So clearly they're talking to their constituents and figuring out what these places need.
But, you know,
that would be.
we also saw very low ratings, viewership for Donald Trump's inauguration,
I'm
which
sure he
means
loves
a lot of people. Joe Biden got like 13 million more viewers 4 years ago, and Trump himself got 11 million more viewers 8 years ago. Here's my concern, though. I understand that people are tuning out in order to preserve their mental health. And we have to figure out how to find a balance of how do we preserve our mental health, but how do we tune in and get engaged and get informed and get
What do you
outraged?
suggest?
Well, watch the inauguration.
I
I
suggest
watched it.
figuring out a way of consuming enough news so that you are informed, but not consuming so much news that you're on the floor.
You can
But
just
they-
watch The View.
Just watch us. Well, that people do
More
that.
to life than politics, too. That's what we have to
And
remember.
since you